Hey guys, today I'll talk about our favorite Black Templars and more specifically which detachment I recommend to use for your competitive games. We'll analyze 3 of the best ones in my opinion and discuss the advantages and disadvantages of each one. So without further ado, let's dive right in. First, let's freshen up what we get from our favorite Righteous Crusaders, the original Black Templars detachment. We get the durability of the Uphold, the Honor of the Emperor vow, of course. I think that you are almost always like 99%, as was the case in 9th edition, want to use the Uphold, the Honor of the Emperor because it's just really the most statistically beneficial one to have, especially if you're using the combos that you should use if you're running this detachment. Plus, you get some defense from the Battle Shock, which sometimes, if you're playing against Chaos Knights or Tyranids, can become very useful. We get the incredible combo of Tannhauser's Bones comboed with something like a Terminator Brig with shields, where 40 wounds with 5-up shrug are just so hard to take down for any faction, whatever, no matter what this faction is. It is difficult to kill 10 Terminators with 5-up shrug in cover with Armor of Contempt. It's just very difficult to do, and it's good to have that sort of unit in your back pocket. It also combos beautifully with 1 CP Vicious Riposte when you can fight on death for 1 command point. So if someone decides to charge you with multiple units, you will get to strike them down after your particular model dies. And of course, you select which models die in which order. So it means that, for example, if multiple units charged your Terminator Blob, and your opponent will most likely need a couple of units to finish your Terminators at least. So they will charge you with multiple units, and you removing those units that are in engagement range of the unit that you want to strike, so the unit that did not target your Terminators yet, can be sort of a reverse counter-offensive stratagem. So obviously it's a very, very strong stratagem, and fighting on death on 3+ is not guaranteed, but very likely to happen. We get to activate other vows, of course, with the 1 CP stratagem, so we can access lethal hits or sustain hits just to enhance our melee even more, and also can move reactively D6 when shot. So in some cases it can be extremely powerful depending on your particular situation on the board. If you can move onto an objective, if you can move closer to the unit that shot you but away from the unit that's going to charge you, for example, as you need to move closer to the unit that just shot you. So there are some cases where that can be very powerful. You can also prevent a non-vehicle monster unit from falling back on a 4+, because you're using the Uphold Honor of the Emperor vow, so you don't get that 3+. It's a powerful stratagem, however, it's very dicey. Obviously, 4+, you're spending 1 CP to not let someone fall back, but if it means that your entire brick of Sword Brethren or Terminators or Primaris Crusader squad will not be shot this entire phase, the shooting phase of your opponent, it can be more than worth it. And of course, we can also get +1 AP on our melee attacks for, again, the same 1 command point. So quite an impressive and useful suite of stratagems you get here. Quite a bit focused on melee, as we would expect from Black Templars. So not a lot of versatility, but you get some movement buffs, some durability buffs, and some output buffs as well. Your character combos of Helbrecht plus Castellan and Grimaldus plus some unit don't require the detachment to work, thankfully, so we can still experiment with other stuff, but they really enjoy all the melee-oriented stratagems we've just discussed, and they also like the added durability, because there's a very big difference between Sword Brethren with 3 wounds and Sword Brethren with 3 wounds and 6+ Feel No Pain, especially if you're getting targeted by something like Plasma Damage 3 Plasma Inceptors. So a lot of advantages for your melee. Probably the only big disadvantage I can see is that we're not getting any big mobility buffs here, so we are relying on something like Grimaldus or your transports to get you into the fight, and also no shooting buffs at all. And nowadays in 10th edition, you really want to be active in shooting and combat, because there are a lot of situations where just combat is not enough. Now let's talk about Gladius Task Force. This detachment is favoring more balanced approach and likes you to spread out in terms of units that you run, shooting and melee both, with probably a bit more emphasis on shooting. Oh, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't run Sword Brethren. You very much should, because it's just a very good unit. Halberd gives you, first of all, himself. He's a very powerful character in combat. Those mortal wounds he causes when he's fighting someone, and also the 5s cause lethal hits with him, thanks to Caston also being in the squad. So that solves the biggest problem the Sword Brethren have, in my opinion, which is low strength. You can also go an interesting MSU Sword Brethren style way, where you have a lot of small 5-man Sword Brethren units, either on foot or in bolsters, with characters attached to them for buffs. Definitely don't forget Grimaldus as well. He's a very good character to run a squad of Sword Brethren on foot, because you'll be able to activate his ability in the command phase, which you cannot do if he's inside a transport. So he always wants to be on the ground in most cases, and he will provide you with a 5-up shrug for durability or the advance and charge, which is nice to have, even though you get access to that with Gladius Task Force doctrines, but you only get that either for a command point or once per game for your doctrine. So having some independence of that is nice. If we still want to approach this Gladius Task Force army, in my opinion, as any other Gladius Task Force, so not skipping on the old classic units such as the Biogreamer, that, as I coined the name for it, I think it's the Biologist plus Aggressors inside a Redeemer combo. It's a staple unit and is worth the investment almost always. You get access to Advance and Charge and Fallback and Charge army-wide, as you probably already know, and it's hard to underestimate how good that is on a melee-focused army, which you can build out of this Gladius Task Force plus Black Templars. Especially when you still get that all-important 1 CP stratagem for +1 AP and lance on your attacks, which you get if you are inside the Assault Doctrine, and you can also still fight on death, which are two biggest things about the Black Templars detachment, in my opinion. Yes, it costs 2 command points, but you don't have to roll, you fight on that automatically, so this is a good thing. Check out my how to build a competitive Space Marine list on how to actually use the Gladius Task Force to its fullest potential, and there is a full list at the end of the video, so you can take that as a reference point and try to build something of your own with the Black Templars units inside. You definitely miss out on durability here, though, because that 6+ Feel No Pain is very hard to underestimate. It's a very powerful ability, especially on multi-wound models. And of course the 5-up shrug that you don't get here, the Tannhauser's Bones combo, it definitely will be missed, and I really like myself a very powerful, durable Terminator unit, which is much harder to build here in the Gladius Task Force, as we don't have those synergies. So, less focused on melee, we get less durability here in the Gladius Task Force, but we get much more versatility, and you can have a much more balanced list with aggressors in the Redeemer doing shooting and melee, with your Inceptors covering your flanks and shooting and being able to get extra EP and ignore cover, so bumping up their output massively. And all other good Space Marine units that we have access to, which we can always use, but Gladius just makes them so much better. And being able to advance and charge just for your melee purposes is extremely important, as you don't have to rely so much on your transports, and you just have more threat range. And following back and charge is one thing I really don't like that Black Templars don't have, as you very often find yourself in a situation where in your turn you really want that big strong unit elsewhere, and you just don't want to waste your entire activation on finishing off that one chosen from the chosen squad, for example. So that's the advantages and disadvantages of the Gladius Task Force, and now let's see the last one. Vanguard Spearhead. This detachment is more about infantry, which is good, as Black Templars, most of the Black Templars good units are infantry, and shooting from afar, which is less good, because we want to be fighting. So that's why the Vanguard is on the 3rd place, which I think, in my opinion, it loses out to the Righteous Crusaders and Gladius mostly, but there is a very powerful combo here which I want to tell you about. Obviously, it's the Infiltration combo, where you take a very big strong blob, say a Primaris Crusader squad or Sword Brethren squad, along with characters. So Halberd for the buff, and with Castellan as always, of course, for the lethal hits. And you give the Castellan the Blade-Driven Deep enhancement, which allows you to infiltrate that huge unit 9 inches away from your opponent's deployment zone. It's a very powerful unit by itself, which the biggest problem of that unit is mobility, and being able to just put that unit right into your opponent's grill turn 1 is very hard to deal with for most armies. You definitely want to have other infiltrators to be able to screen this unit out, because you don't want to be just on autopilot always. Okay, I have this huge unit, I put it right 9 inches away from my opponent's deployment zone. First unit I drop, no matter what happens, I don't even think about what my opponent has in their unit, because you can just give that unit for free to your opponent if they roll to go first. You don't want that to happen. You want to be smart about that. Think if your opponent has infiltrators. If they have infiltrators, think of where they can block you out from deploying in a nicer spot where you're hidden behind a ruin, for example. Also use your own other infiltrator units to screen out from their melee threats, especially for factions like World Eaters, where you really want to make sure that they cannot charge you first, because you're gonna just disintegrate if they do. So be smart about that. And if you want more personalized advice like that, check out the links to my Patreon in the description, where I teach people how to play just like this. You also get to use 1 CP calculated thing to move D6 when charged, which is an extremely powerful ability and can save your infiltrated unit sometimes if you've made a mistake with your positioning. And 1 CP guerrilla tactics, which can help you with mobility of one of your melee bricks if you find that brick out of position at the end of your opponent's fight phase. For example, your brick has finished off something small that got charged or did charge your brick last turn. For some reason they ended up in combat, so your brick won that fight, now is free, and you can use the guerrilla tactics to redeploy that essentially in your turn. 2 CP Surgical Strikes is a situational buff, but very scary for your opponent when you actually need it, because it gives you precision on your entire squad's weapons and can allow you to get to their dangerous leader model, like for example High Tyrant protected by the bodyguard, bypassing those bodyguards. So Vanguard is an interesting one. We get almost no real buffs to combat here, because precision is a very situational thing. We don't get the +1 to wound, we don't get extra AP, so we have to rely on our own sheer strength here, on the sheer strength of the units themselves and character buffs, to carry that banner of melee in this situation. However, we are getting this interesting combo of infiltrators, which can turn the game upside down, and if your other part, the other roster, is a very well oiled and a very powerful machine of destroying your opponent, it can become a really big headache for your opponent to first deal with that huge thing in front of them and then go after your other stuff. So it can buy you more time and more points in destroyed opponents' units. However, we're not getting advance in charge, we're not getting full back in charge here like we do in Gladius, we're not getting so many melee buffs, almost no, as compared to the Black Templars detachment. So it's an interesting case where you have to juggle that melee strength, shooting strength, which this detachment does help tremendously, and all those interesting buffs. And of course, we also get from this detachment -1 to hit when 12 inches away, which is not going to help the infiltrating unit, but can protect your other melee bricks somewhat in transit when they're moving from point A to point kill your opponent's units. As a little bonus, here's a roster example of a Vanguard Spearhead that has Black Templars units here. This is how I could run this potentially. So we have a Castellan, High Marshal Halberd as our Warlord, and they obviously attach to a 10-man Primaris Sword Brethren squad. We also have a Chaplain who will also attach to the other 10-man Primaris Sword Brethren squad, and Lieutenant with a combi weapon for buffs and just being an awesome guy. 6-man Inceptor squad with probably bolters, but you can do Plasma as well, it doesn't really matter, they're both very good. Infiltrator Squad as our first infiltrator choice and protection from deep striking, a Land Raider Redeemer to carry that second 10-man primary squad, the one that doesn't infiltrate, 3 5-man scout squads, and 2 Vindicators for the shooting support. So this is an interesting, I think, take on how you could run Black Templars in a Vanguard detachment. We've already discussed the Gladius in the video I mentioned before, how to build the competitive Space Marine list, and the Black Templars list we discussed in how to play Black Templars, so I decided to show you this Vanguard one instead. So ultimately, it's your decision which detachment to run and which one you consider to be the most powerful. I know which one I would probably personally run, and if you've been watching this channel for a while, you probably can easily guess which one that is, but I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to influence your opinion this much. I've given you, I think, all the information you need to make an educated choice, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.